Welcome to the Roundtable Consult. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Williams, and I'm joined as always by my wonderful co-host, attorney Sonia Madison. Sonia, blessings and salutations to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we start off peaceful today. It's so good to see you yet another Saturday. I'm
Oh,
blessed to be able to see your wonderful face.
good to be seen. Did you
Yes.
have a good week? Oh,
I did have a pretty good week. You know,
right.
it's hard. You know,
It
these weeks
goes
go
by.
by so quickly
It
that
goes
you
by.
like, what happened this week? I don't know. Was I around for it, or it was just a wind that just came through? I've been coughing again, and unfortunately, I think bad weather front came through maybe 2 weeks ago, and it caught me with a cold. And then I think I might have been coughing last Saturday when we were on the show. Maybe I held it pretty well, but now I'm feeling the after effects of that with some hoarseness. So those of you who don't get my usual rich baritone voice in this conversation and you're missing it, my apologies. Hopefully and prayerfully, it will be back again next week.
It was like we can't stand this content, but at least I can enjoy the voice. And now you took away the voice.
Her voice is gone too. So you just all out, y'all, you just left with Sonya today. So I apologize for that too.
Last Saturday I was so excited. Gabby Douglas, a returning gymnast, came back. It didn't do as well as she would have liked, but I was just so happy to see her back on the competition floor in gymnastics. So that started off my week fairly well. The rest was just work, but
Why were you so happy to see her back on the competition floor?
I mean, I enjoy a nice comeback, and so I mean, she's been out of gymnastics for 8 years, and yeah, I mean, I enjoyed watching her in 2012 when she won, and as well as in 2016. But I know afterwards there was so much controversy,
Hmm.
particularly in 2016, about her even being on the team, and I can tell that that weighed a lot. And so to see her, put all that negativity aside and still go back into the sport and make a comeback, because to me that's one of the hardest sports is gymnastics. You probably can speak better as a physician, but I just feel like it touches every single part of your body in terms of for the sport. And so for her to give the discipline to do it, it's just admirable.
I'm sure it's a lot of impact, particularly in all the joints and everything too. So
Yeah.
you just like that's a lot of impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's amazing though how what the stuff that people put their bodies through trying to be athletes. And honestly, I didn't hear about what happened with Tiger Woods and his comebacks, dreams or hopes down at the Masters. I need anybody who happened to watch that and know where he wound up in or how he fared in that. Let us know because he was like 48 years old and he would
Oh, he's 48.
46.
I'm
He's
surprised he
46 or
even had.
48, one
Okay.
of the two, but he would have been probably one of the oldest persons to have won the Masters if he did. But I know he did qualify at least, and I don't know what the final outcome was. So any of you listeners who are tuned in today, if you know what the outcome of it was, let us know, or either I'm sure Sonia will be searching on Google here in just a
Oh,
moment.
and I'll figure it out.
She's probably doing it right now because she likes to come through with an answer when I don't have one. So
But speaking of sports, I hear that Michael Jordan, Serena Williams, Derek Jeter are about to all come together on a liquor business. So they're getting into the alcohol business. But I was like, look at all these top echelon athletes coming together. He was like, I got my friend Serena Williams. I wish I could have friends like that.
Yeah, I think they see an opening happening with Ciroc. What's that?
Yeah, yeah. So Roger's gone. Thank you, Diddy.
They feel like, hey, listen, there's an opportunity,
And I
It's
think it
rare.
starts with a C too. I can't remember the name of the product, but it does start with a C.
You are so wrong talking about Diddy like that, man.
Hey,
And
yeah.
Ciroc is going straight down the tube. So,
That's the FBI. All I did was just say the FBI did raid his home.
oh my God. What do you think about that? Do you have any thoughts about that now?
The
Whether or not?
FBI. I mean, again, if he's done something wrong and was, I guess, smart enough to record it, because I know that that's what they were going in to get some of the video footage, then, yeah, he should be punished. That's consequences of actions.
People do some dumb stuff, I'll tell you. And especially when you record yourself. It's one thing to for somebody else to record you, but it's a whole other thing when you record yourself. And speaking of other people recording you, I think there was this whole thing in the courts this week about Donald Trump. Of course, he's still in the courts under the hush money trial, and I believe the jurors got to hear. I don't know if they were able to hear the recorded tape of him actually, where Michael Cohen recorded a conversation with his client, and in that conversation, he mentioned, paying Stormy off with cash, or it was vaguely. I guess they didn't specifically state Stormy's name in that conversation, but I presume when Michael Cohen takes the stand, he'll make reference to it and clarify that it was regarding the payment to Stormy, and Donald Trump offered to pay cash. He said, no, 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 no. Those types of things. What do you think about it? What do you think about an attorney who feels the need to record a conversation secretly with his client?
Um, because considering the client being Donald Trump, I definitely understand all recordings. I mean, the guy lies and throws you under the bus quicker than the truth can ever, take his head. And part also who took the stand was Stormy Daniels' attorney during this time that she was negotiating. So it was interesting to see both of the attorneys are on the witness list during what's happening here. And I mean, so far, people can say, oh, this is a porn star that is out to get the president. But so far, the evidence have been consistent. I recognize this is the prosecution presenting their half. We'll get the defense half. And so don't worry, guys. I'll still be open to hear what the defense has to say. But to me, they're making sure, okay, even if you want to consider Stormy Daniels to be a lack of credibility for whatever reason, we've put attorneys on there. We've put, getting the guy over National Enquirer. We've got businessmen on here. So we've got a variety of people that are corroborating the same story. So
Yesterday, Hope Hicks actually took the stand, and Hope Hicks was the communications
yeah.
director,
Mhm.
very close with the family. I think she came into the administration through Ivanka Trump, being friends with Ivanka. And I think she initially reported to Jared Kushner and then eventually was elevated to the communications director for the Trump campaign and/or administration initially. And, she actually testified before January 6th committee about some of the things that had gone on. And I think that in and of itself actually cast a dark shadow over their relationship with the Trumps. And so they hadn't really spoken in over 2 years or something like that. So she sat on the stage. She on the stand. She gave her testimony, some of which was pretty damning. I think one of the most damning thing that she might have said was that there was a conversation between her and Donald Trump, where Donald Trump was talking about the information coming out now after he had been elected president, and he was saying that it was better that it came out now after he was elected than that it did come out than it came out than it would have been if it had come out during the election. And that was the last questioning, I think, that the prosecution had for her before the defense started their cross-examination. And really, almost at the onset of the defense cross-examination, before many questions were asked, uh, Hope Hicks just broke out in tears and became very tearful, lips quivering, according to reports at least, and had to take a moment to compose herself. I think they actually recessed for a couple of minutes and had her come back onto the stand. And so there's all this speculation about why would she become so tearful? Was it like the defense came? And I know sometimes cross-examination, correct me if I'm wrong, cross-examination sometimes can be a little bit more hostile than the prosecution. But I can only imagine what it must be like to be a dear family friend, or at least have been a dear family friend, and then you witness some atrocities that you have to now testify against, and you still think somewhat highly of this family, but you have to you now have to testify damaging information against them. I can imagine that can be a tough situation for her.
Well, I can have a little empathy until you said you still have high regard for this person. Then, okay, well, I don't know how much empathy I can have since you still have a high regard for someone with this many felony counts.
Well,
But
one of the things that she has a high regard, and she says he thinks he's a master communicator. Is that way that she described it, master communicator, and I have to almost agree with her because it's not a matter of having the most prolific oratory skills. It's about communication is actually delivering a message to a person and having them receive that message, and he knows excellently how to communicate his message to his followers and to the people, his supporters, and have them 100% on board. He does that excellently.
well, I mean, I will say he is excellent at being honest. Now, how you define if your communication, how you define a good communicator as someone who's just able to honestly articulate their intentions. Okay, yeah, he does do that. But if we're also talking about someone who is mindful of the listener, someone who is, even make sure they use the words in the English language. Make sure they're not using inappropriate hand gestures because that is also a form of communication. I'm not going to put Donald Trump as the top communicator, but nonetheless, I hear your point.
She called him an excellent businessman too. I think something to that regard. An excellent businessman. So.
My empathy starts decreasing. Where is this metric?
He gave her a job, a very prominent job. How about that? She's
As
grateful
well, they
for it.
did threw her on the bus multiple times because I'm also like I can hear. Yes, I don't doubt that you have received a lot of death threats. I don't doubt that this has been a very difficult position, more so because of his base than it is because of Donald Trump. But nonetheless, this isn't the first time you took the stand. Like you've been questioned. You know this drill. So why now are we so emotional? This isn't the first time you've come out and spoken against him. And she's been all over several platforms speaking against Donald Trump.
But this is the first time doing it under oath with him sitting in front of her.
Nonetheless, well, I'll give you the him sitting in front of her. But like you said,
Mm.
it was part of the January 6th hearings. And I'd imagine some of that was also under an allegiance of hope, I mean, oath or whatever. But nonetheless,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not disputing that this is distinguished, but I'm also like, but you've had practice, saying all the things that you have been saying for the past, several months against Donald Trump, which I appreciate that you're saying it now, although it'd be nice if we stop having so many Monday morning quarterbacks during that administration.
Yeah. Well, he's gotten fined $9,000 for violating his gag order.
Finally, right?
Finally, hold that $9,000. That's going to break the bank for him, or
Well, as a
sorts.
broke person, it should. You guys still think he has money? Okay.
Well, I'm sure he's got $9,000 at least to cover it, and so that $9,000 shouldn't cause a whole bunch of problems. But he is actually came out and made a statement before. He's like, "Well, because of I'd love to testify, but because of the gag order, I can't even testify." And that was all performance for his supporters and for his base, so that they can get all riled up. And the judge in the case after the following morning actually put on his performance mode and said, your client is fully able to testify. Nothing in this gag order. Just want to make it perfectly clear that nothing in this gag order is preventing your client from testifying. Both of them put on their performance faces and communicated what they already knew the other person knew.
Right.
So.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I
So
mean, poor Trump lawyer, because I mean, I don't doubt a couple of times he's had to say things that are probably not accurate as it
did,
relates to the attempt to tame his client.
did you see the video with his attorney and him in the background? His attorney's in the background as Trump was saying, even with this gag order, I can't even testify. And his attorney like he don't know what to do, whether to shake his head yes or no. He started first he was agreeing with everything he said, and then quickly no. I was like, this guy, poor attorney, because one, he may not even get paid.
Right. Let's say that $9,000, he'd probably be like, I'll take it. I will take
Right.
it.
Jeez.
No, he's
So,
probably not going to get paid. I mean, none of them have gotten paid so far. So surely he's not expecting a payment. And I'm sure
ooh.
that would be Donald Trump's argument.
Somebody called one of our listeners called Donald Trump the dog whisperer. I don't think he's the dog whisperer. He's like the racist whisperer.
Which, speaking of dogs, what do you think about his potential VP candidate putting in her book how she shot a dog?
Oh, I'm not going to say anything about that, but because I know how people feel about their dogs. But what was the reason why she shot the dog?
Well, she and I haven't read the book for those listening, and this is what I've received from social media and articles. She was trying to say that sometimes she has to be tough and disciplined, and she had this dog who was supposed to be a hunting dog but wasn't hunting very well, and ended up going into somebody else's yard, was tearing up something, and so that's why she shot him. That's the
Do
gist that
not
I got. Again,
do,
if you guys have read the book, by all means.
do not elect her president of the United States
Or vice
because
president, right?
if you are rioting anywhere, you will get shot. It sounds like one of those bull. What's that guy's name? Bull. Gosh, the racist guy down in Selma before. Gosh, bull somebody. I can't remember. But anyway, the whole point was to wind up shooting people who were non-compliant and who disturbed and disrupted your peace. So there would be a whole lot of college students who would get shot under her administration. At this point, maybe that's what she's trying to tell them. Listen, if y'all have this college thing break out around here, I'm shooting you because you're not. Well, truth of the matter is that not what Jesus did?
I don't remember Jesus shooting anyone.
No, he didn't shoot anybody, but when the fig tree didn't produce what it was supposed to produce, Jesus came back and he cursed it and killed it. You're supposed to do what you're supposed to do, or else you'll get killed, at least according to Christy No.
I was gonna say you didn't say you're gonna say anything, but you just compared a pet to a tree, and so good luck.
They both have life. They both have life. Some longer than others. So
Well, she's been trying to double down since she's gotten so much backlash. But I just can't believe you put that in the book.
yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't even know what you thought was gonna come up of that. No, I mean, especially when you have the options to take it to a rescue center or ask neighbors if anyone wanted. It was a puppy, so
A puppy
a puppy at
didn't
that.
even have a chance to learn. Oh my gosh. Bull Connor, one of our viewers, fortunately came in to save me on that one. Bull Connor
Okay.
was the person's name. So, but anyhow, I don't know how that works there, but I'd be curious to find out how she would respond if some of these things are going on in the college campuses now were going on in her back door. Because I mean, why don't you tell us, guess what's happening with some of these
Yes.
colleges?
So as you guys know, we've got a war happening going on between
Or oh yeah, we
Israel. Yes,
oh I thought you
you're
were
like
talking about. I
war.
thought on the college campuses war.
I mean, we've got to start there.
Okay, you go back a little
We've
further.
got Hamas and we've got Israel that are fighting. Or for like people like to say, you got the Israelis and the Palestinians. But anyways, and so we've talked about this before. It is a history that is beyond what we can even articulate. But there have been back and forth and fighting among the two for years. And so we've gotten up to a place where there's been a lot of casualties and the fight continues, the wars continue. I think Joe Biden has asked for even Israel to cease fire, and he got a lot of flack for that. They called him anti-Israel. And so some of these college campuses, particularly at the private universities, some are spilling over. I'll talk a little bit about UGA here, but particularly the private universities has had a lot of protests led by students. And a lot of people have compared it to the Vietnam War, although at least there we were fighting in the war, whereas this isn't a war that we're actually as U.S. troops over, but we are spending a lot of money nonetheless. And so some of the universities we've heard about USC, they've canceled their graduation. Some of them have canceled classes, and some of the university administrators are saying it has become more of a anti Israel a pro-hate type of protest more so than peaceful protests. Whereas on the other side, a lot of people have said, including here, it's what happened in Emory, a lot of people have said, no, it was peaceful protests. It was just the universities are either immediately trying to get out ahead of it by engaging officers, or the officers are being a little bit more aggressive than what some people are saying should happen on some of these campuses. And so the question to some degree is, one, should students have these protests going on while, again, education is still happening? As well as, does these administrators, whether that's public or private, have an obligation to remove those types of distractions so that people can have access to classes?
The
No,
protests.
that's what I said. That's it. They're protesting this war. Well, but that's up to debate. Like what says, some people, depending on the media, some people will say this is a hate protest, hate against Jews, anti-Semitic, and some people will say this is an anti-war protest, and so it has nothing to do with any religion or nationality. It's just, hey, we don't like that both sides are experiencing casualties as a result of this war.
So how do you, first of all, I didn't realize how many, why is all this happening on college campuses? Why does that seem to be the nidus of all of this enthusiasm? And I've heard some stories where they were talking about there aren't really, many of them aren't even college students. People who attend that campus, people are coming on from other campuses and who aren't even in school and are inciting some of the violence with that as well. So I'm not sure. First of all, why does this seem to start on a college campus? What's
I
unique
don't
about
know
a
why you're
college
so
campus, you think?
puzzled by that, because we know, like again, we talked about the Vietnam, we talked about civil rights. We know students do tend to protest what they feel like some type of humanitarian injustice. And so, with as much coverage as it's gotten, to me, as it relates to Israel and the Palestinian, and especially with the back and forth, because it was as if, again, depending on the media outlet, it was as if you said anything critical of what Israel's government is doing and you become anti-Semitic, and that then becomes the headline. And so then you have, to me, a lot of students saying, hey, I should be able to be critical of a government without being labeled anti-Semitic, or I should be
Mhm.
able to have empathy towards the death of Palestinians without having to be labeled anti-Semitic. And so that's why I think some of these students are getting in, because I feel like they're saying, hey, one, our message isn't being heard because it's being clouded in this whole anti-Semitism agenda. But then two, to me, it's no mis comes to wars. You do hear a lot of students protest.
Mhm.
You do. And I mean, in both of our generations, anytime there's a war happening, it usually becomes the political campaign is get us out of this Vietnam War, get us out of the Iraq War, get us out of, that's something. And because students are usually the ones getting drafted to the wars, it's no surprise that they then feel like, hey, I don't want to be the one that has to go over it.
Well, that's part of the criticism of liberal institutions such as of higher learning is that, this all this liberal thought comes forth on these campuses and then it gets out of control. And I posted something the other I don't know if it was this past week or anything, but it was a thought of mine. I said, I don't know why we get so worked up about people when protests turn violence. I mean, because we learned it from our forefathers. And the reality of it is this country was birthed in violent protests. And so it's in the DNA of this country to have a violent protest. I think even unfortunately, I'm not condoning it by any way, shape, or form. But what happens is that when you are afforded free speech, speech is only the nidus of action. So what happens is that speech starts, a thought or recognition or passion develops, and then it's produced, comes out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks things. And then as more you speak a thing, you begin action follows after that. And so what happens on campus of higher learning, these institutions of higher learning, people are allowed and encouraged to think independently, to develop your own opinions, to whether I know it's different from what your mom and your daddy taught you. I know it's different from what they might have taught you at the church. But in this institution, you have the ability and you are encouraged to think broadly about certain things. And you don't always have to take the packaged answer by the people in the media and every place else that's feeding you and or even your family that you're being fed to say that this is the way that it is. It's all the good Jews and all of the bad Palestinians. And I get why people don't want to group the Hamas with the Palestinians, and they keep trying to make that separation there because just as we would say, if you criticize Israel for any of its actions, you become anti-Semitic. The same thing happens to say that if you try to speak up for Palestinian lives, makes you pro-Hamas. And so the problem I think comes, excuse me, problem I think comes in when you have free speech, unregulated speech, because with that freedom comes a responsibility, and we never really highlight the responsibility that comes with that speech. And so now you got these institutions of higher learning that are wanting to foster free speech, but how do you regulate it? You can't have free speech without it being regulated some way or another, and chaos. Otherwise, chaos will ensue afterwards.
Well, I think I think it's a responsibility of the university to regulate it as they see fit. And I do think that for every probably protest that we've heard that may have become violent, it's probably 20 or 30 that are all peaceful. And that's why I say to some degree we got to be mindful with what the media puts out and make sure that
Mhm.
they're also putting out the peaceful protests that are happening. Because even from what I've received reports as it relates to Emory, while there were reports of violence, from my understanding, it was the police initiated. There was a lot of people were just standing around doing what they do on campus. And this is also a private university. So I don't doubt that perhaps university officials said, hey, I don't want this happening at all. And again, there's a difference when it's private, because then, you're not under the conundrum of the First Amendment as much as when you're working or when you're a student at a public university. But nonetheless, I think you also have to teach students that, hey, if you're going to protest, you are doing so at the no, or at least knowing that you are sacrificing something. And your message is, I am willing to sacrifice X because I am so strong on this ideal. And so until then the other side real reaps or feels that consequence, then it's probably not going to be classified as a protest. you know, I mean, I think but that's the idea is hey, if you're not appreciating whatever cause I have, I will then remove myself, or I will then make it harder for you to reap the benefits of whatever you're receiving despite this cause.
So, are you saying some form of obstruction must be present in order for
How
a
we define
protest
an
to be?
obstruction?
Yeah,
Because if how we define it, because again, when we're
of
talking
course,
about
I'm asking
protest,
you.
okay, this is because we're talking about protest, because this is what happens when unions protest, right? And I
Hmm.
mean, they're obviously legally they are okay to protest if they all come together, and they also too will elicit people who don't work at a facility or at an industry to help with the protest, because the people that are working, some of them will get fearful if their face is the one being plastered around and being able to find a job. But nonetheless, what they're hoping to do is to hit the pockets. I'm trying to hit your bottom line. I'm not trying to tear up your facility or whatnot. Now, if it happens that way, which sometimes it does, because again, you're going to have the other side saying, I don't want this either done on my property, or I don't want this to, hinder people who are working from being able to work because they're distracted by all this extra that's going on. And so at some point, then the two sides come and unfortunately a violence can happen. But I also just want to caution, is the violence happening because you had a group of people, unlike Charlottesville, a group of people with the intent of harm? Or is it because you had the other side intent on aggressively removing the people?
Yeah, I'm still of the mindset that protest is not effective unless there's some form of harm. And when I say harm, I'm not talking about bodily harm. I'm not talking about property harm. You have to suffer some type of damage. And usually, the most effective in America form of damage is going to be economic damage. If my protest or boycott causes you some economic damage, then you're going to start listening to me. And unfortunately, I think people have learned that those things take a little bit longer to produce the desired result of producing damage than going in directly causing damage.
Well, in
You
this case, though, this isn't about the school because this isn't going to necessarily take away any money from the school, but this is about trying to reach a government because the only person that really can have any say, honestly, is the Israelis and the Hamas, right? I mean, they're the ones that either in the war or continue to go back and forth, and we know honestly that they're going to be a continue back and forth. But I know that these students are trying to get Biden to come out and take a definitive stand one way or the other. And I'd imagine he feels caution against doing that because, again, no matter what you say, even if you say, I'm against the continuation of this war, someone is going to put you in a box of being either anti Semitic pro-Palestinian, especially when we're talking about an election year. So I just think he's in a rock and a hard place. But I'm also looking at the students like I understand what you're trying to do. I'm just not sure if this is going to get you there.
Right. I mean, why even on the campus? I mean, are you expecting some what's your end point? What's your end result? What are you looking for? Are you expecting the administrators of your university to come together and then make a demand of I saw one person was saying we want the administration at this university to make a demand of the president of the United States. And I'm like, I'm not sure how effectively that works, but
Well, okay, let's say he does that. Are you then going to remove yourself, or is that not even going to be enough? Because let's be honest, if he were to send a letter and say, "Hey, here's my proof, I've done it," again, both of us know he does too. This isn't going to get y'all anywhere. But hey, if that gets you off my lawn, I'll do it. The reality is, it's still not going to get them off the lawn.
I don't know that the I wholly agree with your assertion that the only two that can do something about it is Israel and Hamas. Because I do think that as a nation, we can put more pressure on Israel. And of course, them being a longtime ally of the United States, that puts us in an awkward position. But sometimes the scripture tells us that it's better is the hard word of a friend than the kiss of an enemy. And so what happens is a lot of times we feel like if we give a hard word to our friend, that it's not welcome. It's like we are no longer that person's friend because we tell them you've done wrong. But the reality is that's what a friend, that's what a close ally really does. He tells you when you're wrong, when you need to adjust your behavior. And if you still don't adjust those behaviors, the scripture tells us, it said, if somebody offends you, you go to them, go to that person. If they still won't listen, you bring them before two or three people. And if they still don't listen, bring them before the entire church. So what you do is you escalate it. And I'm not saying that we should run our government like we do the church. I'm just using that as an example there. Initially, what should happen is Biden and Netanyahu have some conversations and say, hey, listen, I'm going to catch a whole bunch of flack on my end if you continue to do this. And it doesn't work because he's like, because Netanyahu says, I'm going to continue to do exactly what I think we need to do that's in the best interest of Israel. And then he takes it before, a couple of other of what do you call it? The what's the group of eight or so people, high-ranking senators and high-ranking legislators. You bring it up to them, they get together and conspire and say, okay, we need to do this together. Still don't work. Take it to Congress. It doesn't work. Well, let's get up some of our other allies around the country, around the world, to come together and say, Israel, you need to fix this. And if you still refuse to listen to that, then I think we need to excommunicate them. Just I mean, and I'm sorry to my evangelical friends who are like, how can you say you're not a friend of
You're gonna
Israel?
be anti-Semitic. You're gonna be anti-Semitic.
Exactly. Well, so what happens if you're either going to believe the Bible and you're going to conduct your own personal behaviors and your own personal beliefs according to what the Bible says to do, or you're going to, do it some other kind of way according to the world. Now, the Bible says that if after all of these things have happened and that person still doesn't conform and correct the behavior, that you're supposed to have no dealings with them. You're supposed to mark that person and have no dealings with them. And when they come back, yes, when Netanyahu is replaced by somebody else who has their mind on straight and has a little bit better perspective on this, then they come back to the table. Let's talk about reuniting it and rekindling our friendship and our allyship.
So, from my understanding, and this is based on the White House statement that they've made, President Biden has not only met with the Prime Minister over with Gaza, but also has met with the Israeli government and said, "Hey, there needs to be a ceasefire. We need to put in steps to address the civilian harm. We need to put in steps to end all these atrocities." So, from my understanding, that has been attempted to talk to these leaders and say, "Stop." But whether it goes to the point that you're going, the only reason I say is because there's just so much history behind it. And I think that because there's so much history, no one knows who's right or wrong. And I don't even know if at this point it's a matter of being right or wrong. It's a matter of I just want to say we've gone through all this and at least we come out with a win.
I don't think that there is a win. I don't honestly. I don't think there
And
is a
I'm with you.
win.
I don't think there's a win either, but I just don't think Israel sees ceasefire as a win.
It, and I'm sure they don't. And it won't be a win. It won't be a win for Israel at least because Hamas will still exist, and Israel will continue on to have this fight. And the reality of it is that unless you destroy the entire nation, and which I'm not advocating, but which Netanyahu says that he's not advocating, but apparently a lot of his actions are supporting the fact that I'm just wiping out anybody who might possibly be Hamas, even if they are, humanitarian aid workers. We're with you, taking them out of here too. So I don't think that there is a solution to that, and that's where we err, I think, as humans, is to think that we can fix every problem, and every problem is not intended for us to be fixed, or at least intended to be fixed by us. And no
Yeah.
amount of diplomacy is going to fix that for us. So now, at some point, people have to start thinking about America first.
Well, which is why again I go to these students. I'm like, what is going to be your end game? Because I don't think if your end game is, well, I want Biden to take more of a aggressive move. Okay, well, he has taken an aggressive move, but let's be real. You've got two nations, neither of which are willing to wave any type. They don't even know where the white flag is, so they're not even thinking about waving it. And so I don't know then from there, where do you go? And I hate to sound then like some of these Republicans are probably saying, hey, the university should have implored the police, whatever of every state or whatever locality to remove them. But I do think that would go against what we are teaching our kids in school about the importance of First Amendment rights, the importance of protest, how peaceful protest has moved the needle along in this country. But I also hate the idea that it is not only a distraction to students, but it's also the message is getting distorted. And it is becoming more so, is this a anti-Semitic or is this truly about the war? Because you have people who are Jews saying, I don't feel comfortable going to class. Now, is your lack of comfortability because you don't want us to be critical of Israel? Because then, okay, well, less life. But but now, if is your lack of comfortability because you feel as if people are attacking you by virtue of your nationality, then I do think that's a problem that the universities do have to address.
Well, won't it eventually come down to your nationality? Because I mean, the reality is none of us are over in Gaza right now fighting this. And
No,
so
but just be someone is protesting against the war doesn't mean that they're saying I don't like Jews.
is that not an eventual? outcome.
I don't think it should be. And to
It
me, if
shouldn't
it
be.
is because the media is distorting the message. If it is, it's because the media or one of these political parties is destroying the message.
Exactly. And so, and I don't know that it's just necessarily the media or the political parties. I think it's partly human nature, because the more you, if I perseverated on all the bad things that, racist white supremacists did, if I perseverate on that and that becomes a huge focus on me, of mine, I'll eventually start disliking white people. Every white person that I look at will then just become like, you're another one of those. How do I know that you're not one of them? And I'll start seeing myself actually treat people differently because I have spent too much time perseverating on the actions of a small group of those people. And unfortunately, I think that's what happens too much when we get people involved in passionate protest. Passion is great, but I think passion uncontrolled is destructive. Eventually, it's destructive. It's not just destructive to property or anything, but it's destructive to humanity, I think, and to our ability to be able to interact with each other in some type of a reasonable fashion. So I do think the more that these type of things are fanned, and I can hear already my Republican friends saying, see, that's why Obama was probably the most racist president ever, because he kept stirring the pot. No, some things you do have to talk about, and you have to talk about them in the right fashion, in the right forum, and in the right tone. But when you allow free speech to go on unregulated and it keeps getting more and more passionate, more and more vehement, vitriolic, then it can't help but I think spill over into some form of racism.
Well,
In
and
this
I guess to
case,
me, it depends on, I guess, the person by your example, because I do think it's one thing to have grown up in an environment in which you are constantly hit with microaggressions or which you are constantly hit with prejudice. And so then you see that for the majority of your life, and then you go to a college campus and you're seeing the protest. I can understand how you then can conflate it all. But if for the most part you have lived in this sense of privilege, I don't think just because you happen to go to school and now you see some peaceful protesting happen that you should now think all of a sudden we're getting into the let's hate Jews realm. And that's where we'll eventually go. To me, it'll be more so what has gotten us there, because I know we had the Kanye West rant. We've had a lot of anti-Jew, actions happening that were truly anti-Semitic. And so if you're taking all that and then adding to the peaceful protests, I can see your point. But if you're saying, hey, I recognize some of the stuff that was truly anti-Semitic and how the world swarmed in on them, because Kanye West got a lot of backlash, how the world swarmed in on them to make sure that that was not the sentiment of the country. Then you see these people peaceful protests. I would implore you to ask, hey, what is this about, versus going to an instant assumption that it is a anti-Jew protest. I mean,
so have been some criticism that had come up where there have been some people, Zionists don't belong here, or Zionists should be killed, or Zionists don't deserve to live, and people saying words such of that. And then came the whole question, how are you defining Zionism? And that was a conversation that I think that I heard quite a bit that was going on this weekend. Zionism really is just like a movement to for the reestablishment and development of the nation of Israel. Well, that doesn't sound like too big of an issue, unless, of course, you realize that you're on the other side of that. And in order for Israel to be reestablished as a nation means that you're going to go and take some of my territory and displace us. And so, yeah, so then if you use that as a definition, and you can look at that definition of Zionism, nation, Israel just wants to be its own nation. That's all. But then the people on the other side of that said, but they want to destroy us to be able to do that. So why shouldn't we be able to say Zionism is a bad thing? Just like you would say racism is a bad thing. And I'm not, now, for our listeners, I'm not making a comment one way or the other, because I'm not as learned in this as people are. And I'm, for the purpose of diplomacy and everything, but this is for the purpose of conversation, I'm bringing this up. there are those people who believe that, to say those people who are looking for the reestablishment of Israel sounds innocent enough until you start looking at logistically how that happens. And it only happens by displacing the Palestinians. And those people will say, yeah, if you're trying to remove me from my land, yeah, I think you are a Zionist and Zionism will be a bad thing. And I would believe that, not I personally, but those people would say, I would believe that Zionists don't belong here.
Well, and we know a lot of this war is about power and control. Who owns some of the land? Who gets to control some of the land here? And so, yeah, that makes
So
sense.
should they not be able to then say that, because people have gotten criticized by the universities, I think, or even maybe I don't remember what the penalty has been at this point, but they have been criticized by saying words like Zionists don't belong here. Now, if you say Zionists should be killed, I heard one commentator make a comment to say, well, you cross the line there. You can say Zionists don't belong here, but Zionists should be killed. That's a whole different story. But and then you got some people on the other side that says to even refer to Zionists as a hate group is anti-Semitic. You're like, what? I don't even know what to make of all of these things.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, the university again has to look at the rules and regulations because again, if it's to me, if it's become a distraction against your overall mission of education, then yes, you're gonna have to do something about it. And I will say I've heard Zionists heard in several contexts. I have heard it in the white supremacist type context. And so it to me it's like the N word to some degree. I'm sure some people would say, oh, that's just a term of endearment. And then others said, no, those are fighting words. If you see one is leading towards, more so of a distraction, more so physical violence, then I think you should then remove that word from being used on the campus. And to me, you're not going to please everyone, but the university, sorry, you got to make a decision.
Well, one of our viewers was saying that they believe one of the goals, one of the demands of the institutions, the students of the institutions, is that they divest from companies that support the Israeli government. And I'm not sure how institutions of higher learning actually are invested and support those other companies. I don't know if it's from research dollars or saying we're going to separate from this or what. Um, honestly, I don't think his students have given any thought about what their end goal is. What they really want. And we just want to get out and protest because something in us wants to rebel against something. Uh, you know, and that's my more pessimistic.
I know
That's
you're just like they just need something to
you know,
do.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. Again, it's I hate to have what may be deemed by some to be a fatalistic perspective at some point, but I think that you see that's all part of God's plan. He said the end won't come except the rebellion comes first. And so we just see people just rebelling against a whole bunch of things. It doesn't matter what the cause is. It's just something in us that just wants to rebel. And once we get it started, it's hard to back out of it. It just keeps fueling more and more chaos because that's what we as a people, as a species, prefer, as just chaos. Our natural state is
And that's
chaos.
I'm like, I'm encouraging you students rebel against miseducation because there's a lot of flaws when it comes to curriculums. Rebel against again inappropriate relationships among staff and students. Rebel against those so much stuff going on at your university. But I mean, again, this isn't to say
Halfway across the world.
just again, make sure you know what your end goal is. Because again, peaceful protest, all for it. I just hate that if that then means that you fell out of a class, I would hate for you to feel like you have to sacrifice that just so you can peacefully protest on campus.
You said something earlier before that the protest doesn't come without a sacrifice. I wasn't exactly sure what you meant, but when you said it, but the thing that came to my mind immediately was that these students who are protesting. I think I saw one of the Shark guys, who's Mr. Wonderful on the Shark Tank.
Okay.
One of the things he was saying, he said all of these students are just really will never get a job. A lot of these people will never get a job because AI, the way that AI is out there, they'll find your face and they'll be able to run background checks on people best well, who participated in what. And they'll be able to quickly identify you. Interestingly, I applied for this one job once, and it was for an insurance company, and I never really got invited for the interview. The guy I talked to initially was really excited about potentially interviewing me. And the next thing you know, oh no, we're not going to do it. And I wonder if they came on the roundtable consult or if they happen to search your because that's what employers do. They'll
They
check
will, they'll
your
search.
social
And they
media, and now it's so much easier to do with AI out there. They'll be like, did does this person participate in any controversial activities? And instantly, a picture, your picture is searching through all types of databases, and in a matter of minutes, come back and say, oh yeah, he participated in this this protest, and he had this on the social media, X, Y, or Z. And it doesn't take long to get all this information because all of our information is out there in the cyberspace ready for access. And so you better choose what you really believe in. And if that's what you really believe in, you need to stand firm on it and be willing to sacrifice and suffer the consequences of that conviction.
Yeah. So you want to limit yourself. And again, your cause is your cause. Because I'm grateful for everyone during the civil rights movement that peacefully protest and they got their records expunged. So I'm sure they're like, I wish the government would find me in one of those AIs. But nonetheless, for before they even got to that point, they lost a lot of their liberty. Some went to jail. Some, of course, had a hard time getting jobs. Um, and and so yeah, you got to be ready for that sacrifice. But it's again on both ends too.
Yeah. I think and I don't want to compare the loss that you can suffer today with the loss that people had, the loss of life and family back in the civil rights movement. Certainly, people have lost their lives because of their standing up for their beliefs and have been black marketed and forbidden from getting really any type of decent jobs. But guess what? Those were locals at that time. You could move to a different state and nobody really even knows about you. So there were ways to escape some of that a little bit more than there is today. Fortunately, you won't get lynched today because of it, but you'll get a financial lynching or a professional lynching because of your beliefs and your convictions and participation in certain protests. The downside to that is that now you just can't escape it by changing your location. That thing follows you wherever you go. And I think we have to really consider we have to count the costs. No man builds a house without first counting the costs of it, and whether or not he would be able to complete it. And so we have to determine before you so readily get out there and start protesting. I'm talking to my children right now who I don't think
I
have
was gonna say
protested a
because
day in their life.
kids
But
that's why it's usually kids that do it because they don't see the cost. They're
mhm,
not as forward looking as probably adults are. So
yeah.
yes, before y'all go out there, and to some degree, if you were at January 6th, I gotta as a company would like to know when you at the January 6th insurrection.
You're right. Hire that guy. Hire that guy. Yeah, that's the one we're looking for. Unfortunately, one of those patriots is what they call them.
Yeah.
We can hire one of those patriots once they get out of jail. But yeah, that's unfortunate though. But I'm not discouraging or dissuading anyone from getting out there protesting. I'm just telling you to one, know the cost of it. Two, do it appropriately. Don't be one of the ones who's throwing a brick. Don't be anywhere near anybody who's throwing a brick at anybody or at anything. Do it appropriately. Then you have perhaps some hope of being able to be recused from some of the mayhem that ensued as a result of the
And just so
protests.
we articulate what's appropriate, we also mean legal. So you can't go someone's class and just stand there and say, "Well, I was just peacefully protesting." No, no, no.
You
That's
can't do that.
no, you can't protest in the class. You can't
What?
interrupt instruction. So you have to do it during either breaks or when the school is closed or shut down, or during, like I said, you may see people on the lawn, but they can't be inside the classrooms and stuff like
Get
that.
out
Yeah.
of here.
Look
I
at
can't
you.
even go down. I can't even go into the classroom with a t-shirt on and say,
And just sit there. No, no, no.
death to Zionist. I wouldn't do that anyway.
Please don't. And that which goes to another thing, make sure you know your school's policies, because if you don't know them and you just decide, well, I'm just going to peacefully protest, well, that was how you're doing it. It's against a policy. Then again, are you willing to sacrifice your education?
Mm. And your scholarship. Now,
Well, I wasn't commenting at all, but yes.
yeah. But I just heard all of a sudden people like I'm not worried about my money. Well, you may not be worried about your money, but your parents might be worried
But
about your
somebody
money.
may be worried about it. Yes.
Somebody might be worried about the money and the cost of it. And someday you might be worried about the money as well. So don't be too enthusiastic about it. But and why does it happen with young children? Why does it happen with college age students? I think part of it is being young and dumb. Uh,
I think dumb,
it's
uninformed.
uninformed, okay. But young and dumb is part of just this old saying. I didn't finish the other half of it. But part of it is being young and uninformed. And a part of it is being old enough to be liberated from the reins of your parents, but young enough to not know how to handle that liberation. And so that's probably why those seem to be some of the more frequently targeted age groups, because you like all of a sudden got this newfound freedom, but I still don't know how to navigate this freedom in a manner that's going to be beneficial for me, not just today, but also in the future. Nobody ever really think about the second or third order consequences of their actions today. It's one of the things I try to teach my children. It's like, yeah, imagine you go out to the line. He's like, all I'm doing is going out there to protest today. Okay, let's say you go out to the line to protest and you have a sign there. That's good. Now let's think about the second order consequence of that is that somebody starts throwing bricks and somebody gets injured as a result of it. And then you're like, wait a minute, but I didn't throw the brick. The person next to me threw the brick, but everybody else pointing to you, you threw the brick. And now you're caught up in a judicial system. You get locked up, and now you have to go through court and everything. As a result of going through court and being charged with some of this stuff, your academics fail, you lose your scholarship, you drop out of school. You drop out of school, and what happens with your future there? And so I'm like third, fourth order. I'm like, let's let all these things play out a little
He's
bit.
gonna show you how you're now a bum on the street.
There you go. Why? All for nothing. All because you wanted to protest about a war that's
One
going
mistake,
around
went from
halfway
a full
around the
ride
world.
scholarship to homeless on the street.
That might be a little excessive, but I challenge people to think at least to second or third. What are some of the things that could possibly happen as a result of this? And granted, if you're going to think about some of the negative consequences of it, think about what are some of the positive consequences are as well. And then you weigh your decision about, am I going to participate? Am I going to continue on with this, weighing these potential outcomes? And if so, how can I guard myself from some of the negative potential outcomes?
And don't fall under the pressure to feel like you have to know who you are. Because I think that's had something to do with just adulting in general, particularly as you're going to college and you're told, pick a major, pick your fraternity, pick your group of friends. I just think then at that age, like, okay, well, who am I? And now I've got to make decisions based on who I feel like I am at this moment. And it could be easy to see, well, this is a cause. Maybe I'm passionate about humanitarian efforts, and it's easy to then just draw into it without again having a conversation about, okay, what exactly does this mean if I do X, Y, and Z?
Mm.
But again,
Well,
that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
and it doesn't mean you should either. So you pray about it. Pray about it. Let the Lord lead you.
All right, welcome to adulting. You have
Just
to make tough decisions daily.
be ready for whatever consequences come along with it. You learned it here on the Roundtable Consult.
Well, hopefully you guys that are listening have been commenting. Thank you so much for your comments so far. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are here every Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. You can also catch us on your favorite podcast platform. Please go like and subscribe and check out some of those old episodes. And you can also check us out on YouTube. Go ahead and like us over there and see some of our smiling faces as we talk about what's going on in the news. So until next Saturday, have a blessed week.